Good afternoon. My name is Jamie Seward, and I'm so happy to see you all today. I am joined by the wonderful and fabulous Fawn Weaver and our moderator, Julie Ho. Thank you. I'm the Associate Director of Affinity Engagement Programs here at Johns Hopkins. And today we'll be talking with Fawn about her entrepreneurship journey and her whiskey company. And before I turn the program over to our moderator, Julie Ho, who's a Hopkins alumna, I encourage you to ask any questions you may have by typing them in the Zoom Q&A at the bottom of your screen. We'll have time at the end of the program to answer your questions. I also want to share that the chat feature has been turned off for this program. So without further ado, I will turn the program over to Julie. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Jamie. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. I am Julie Ho. I'm a graduate of the Krieger School of Arts and Sciences, and I'm so excited to jump into this conversation. American whiskey is the perfect topic to discuss during a lunch hour, or perhaps we're just getting around to breakfast. We're so grateful to have Fawn Weaver with us today. She is a serial entrepreneur, an investor. She's worked in PR, hospitality, real estate. She's a best-selling author. I mean, the list goes on and on. But for today's conversation, one of the key things that I think we want to lean into is the fact that she is a storyteller. Fawn is not just sharing incredible whiskey with all of us. She is sharing the story of Uncle Nearest, and I think it's really exciting that we'll get a chance to unpack it. Fawn Weaver, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us. Oh, it looks like you're on mute, Fawn.
There we go.
Hi.
Thank you for having me.
Of course, we're so excited to have you here. I think, again, that the story of Uncle Nearest is incredibly inspiring and unexpected, and it's really a rich history. So I think to kick us off, tell us, is there a real life Uncle Nearest?
Yes, there is. And the irony is the reason why the brand is called Uncle Nearest is because the name that he went by was Nearest Green. And if you think about it, if we put that on a bottle, then people would be looking at Nearest Green and it sounds like your local golf course. So we had to figure out, how do we identify him as a human being? And although his legal name was Nathan Green, which we could have used, the challenge is that his children and his grandchildren, even in their legal documents, never did. They used Nearest. And so looking at it, we said, listen, if all of his friends and family called him Uncle Nearest, his kids called him Nearest, we're calling him Nearest, and we're not going to question that. And so, yes, he was not only a real man, but he was the first known African-American master distiller. He is the difference as we know it, the difference maker, if you will, between Kentucky bourbon and Tennessee whiskey as we know it today. He was the teacher, the mentor of a young white orphan named Jack Daniel, and he was Jack Daniel's first master distiller. Following the Civil War, Nearest Green became a free man. He was a formerly enslaved man. And the year that the Civil War ended, Jack Daniel turned 18. And at some point after that, he asked for Nearest to become his first master distiller. And so he did.
Awesome. Well, I'm so glad to hear that there is real history behind it. Have you had a chance to talk with the family of Uncle Nearest, and what have they had to say about this experience and journey?
Yeah, so there's a couple of things. Number one, our master blender is 5th generation Nearest Green descendant. And I spent time with over 100 of his descendants, and they're in they're in 6 different places. And I flew to them wherever they were and spent a lot of time with them. I interviewed them, all of the elders. When I began working on this back in 2016, his granddaughter, believe it or not, was still alive. At 106 years old, she still lived by herself. She had a nurse that would come and bring food, but she at 106 still lived by herself.
That's incredible.
Insane. She passed away at 108. And then Jack Daniel's eldest descendant was still alive. And she at the time was 102, 103. She passed at 105, not long after Miss Nellie Mae, Nearest's granddaughter, passed. So you had 2 rich legacies in which I was able to tap into both of them. to be able to learn the history and the story of Nearest Green. And I was able to fill in some pieces, because you can have documents, but if people aren't there to give you the oral history that goes with those documents, you can get the whole thing wrong just by looking at the documents. And on the reverse side of that, if you solely go off of oral history and you don't have documents to back it up, it's very difficult to cement a person's legacy in the history books. And so we really needed both, and we needed family from both sides, from both Jack's side and from Nearest's side. And so, yeah, I've spent a lot of time with a lot of them. And not only is Nearest's fifth generation descendant is our master blender, but our head of whiskey operations was the head of whiskey operations for Jack Daniels. She retired from the family business, Jack Daniels, after 31 years there. She came out of retirement because she grew up knowing the story of Nearest Green. She grew up with Nearest's family around all the time, her family and their family. And so now you've got Jack's family and Nearest's family both making whiskey at Nearest Green Distillery. It's pretty fantastic.
It's amazing how the histories have converged. And as many of the folks in our audience, I can attest that we're all nerds, being Hopkins alumni and friends. How did you come across this story?
Yeah, Clay Risen, journalist for the New York Times. He is their associate editor, but he is also their whiskey writer. He covers their whiskeys, I guess, and he has several books on the topic. So brilliant person. And he got the story because, from what I understand, Jack Daniels was looking for a way to really reach African Americans during Black History Month. This was back in 2015. And so they sent a pitch, and it was sort of like 10 things you didn't know about Jack, and all of them were associated with Black History Month. Well, one of the lines in this sort of 10 things you didn't know was, it is the white preacher and distiller named Dan Call has been credited all these years with being the teacher of a young Jack Daniel, but it is more likely his slave, Nearest Green, was in fact the teacher. And then it became, so Clay zeroed in on that one thing and did not let go. And so he began working on the piece, but the challenge is he's in New York, Lynchburg, Tennessee. They're not going to talk to a reporter from New York. You're going to get very little information. You really can't do any of it from New York. And so what Clay did is he, as he's described it to me, is something that reporters do all the time. If they don't have the resources or the time to really put into a story, they'll lob it up in hopes that someone will take the ball and complete the play. And he said in all of his years in journalism, he's put up so many lobs, and I was the first time someone actually took the ball and finished the play.
That's awesome. So you've heard about the story. What made you think this is something I want to dig into, whether it's the narrative of it, and then what ultimately led you to then founding a company?
Yeah, well, the first piece is if you think about it, they were looking at Black History Month 2016 is when they were hoping that the story would come out and it, be a Black History Month story. Well, Clay Risen was still working on it. It did not come out until June of 2016. Well, do you remember what happened in June of 2016, right? And so you have this massive division that's going on in our country with the Trump election. And it was the first time, I think, our current generation, so I'm 44, our current generation, and certainly the generation that's after us, is really seeing this division. Obviously, elder generations have seen it before, but this is the first time we are really seeing it in the magnitude that we're seeing it is in that summer of 2016. So this story comes out, and although the story itself was not a negative story, it became a clickbait story for the current moment of people who are angry and frustrated. And so they held on to this because the belief at that time after that article came out was Nearest Green was hidden. Jack Daniels stole his recipe. Nearest was Jack's slave. Like that is what became of the story online. And I mean, Lord knows social media was having a field day with it. And so in the middle of all of that, I had already, before social media went crazy with this, I had already ordered Jack Daniels' Legacy, his book. I saw it referenced online, and I saw it referenced that Nearest Green was mentioned in it. I didn't know if it would say a Negro or an enslaved man, and then someone was just putting the two and two together, or if it would actually say him by name. And I got the book a couple of weeks later while there's this firestorm going on online about this story. And I get into the first early pages of it, and Nearest Green, Nearest Green, Nearest Green, Nearest Green, his boys Eli and George Green. And by the time I got to the end, I realized that Nearest and his family were mentioned more than Jack's own family. Well, that didn't mirror what was going on online. When you're talking about an enslaved man who taught someone who would become a brilliant white business male, you didn't give credit to a slave. If you think about every single bourbon in Kentucky at that same time, I would venture to say they all had enslaved people that were working as their distillers, working in their distilleries. We don't know one of their names. So the only reason we know Nearest Green and who he was and his significance is because Jack made sure when he was alive, everybody knew. Then when his family was running the distillery, they made sure to not only put it in print, but when it came time to do his biography, it's all over it.
Yeah.
That when I looked at that, I said, okay, that's intentional, because the book is being written in 1967, height of the civil rights era. A white reporter from Tuscaloosa, Alabama, comes up to Lynchburg, Tennessee, to write the authoritative biography of the most famous American whiskey maker of all time. It's intentional for Nearest and his family to have been mentioned that many times. And so that to me became a story that, one, I'm a rebel by nature. And so the fact that what I was understanding about this story was the exact opposite of what was online. But the other piece of it is that I write stories on love. Yes, I'm a New York Times bestselling author, USA Today bestselling author, but all my books, everything I've ever done is on love. And reading in between the lines, you do not go through those lists to make sure people remember an enslaved person if there was not love there.
Absolutely.
And so I began to see this as a story of love, honor, and respect. And if I could prove it, it was about so much more than whiskey. So if you go onto our social media handles for Uncle Nearest, the hashtag you will see the most is more than whiskey. And it's because of this element of the story.
Yeah, I think it's incredible that you have this rich history to work with. And of course, the rich history of the creation of the whiskey itself. I think it's really interesting how there's a balance that you have to strike between telling the story, which is the product in itself. And it's an incredible one because most people aren't aware of it. But then you're also trying to sell some whiskey. So can you talk to us what it's like to try and sell the product knowing that you have such an immense history to work with?
Well, the beautiful thing is that for a lot of people, we are a whiskey company. We are, in fact, the fastest growing independent American whiskey brand in U.S. history. We are the most awarded American whiskey or bourbon of 2019 and 2020, the first time those distinctions have gone to any brand outside of Kentucky. We have made history 10 or 12 times at this point in terms of being the first to do this and breaking this record and doing this and all the rest of that stuff. And so for a lot of people, because of that, they look at us as a whiskey company. Every person who works for me, everybody who works in this company understands that we're in the legacy building business. Mm-hmm. That is what this is about. And so I think it's Warren Buffett who, I don't know if he was the person who originally said it, but I hear him say it a lot. If you do something that you love, it will not feel like work. And we have a team that doesn't feel like they're working. And yet we are finding more success than anyone who's come before us. And I think that is because we do not treat this like a job or like a company or like we have to sell this. It really is about cementing Nearest's legacy, and then everything else just falls in place from that.
I think that's really wonderful. I think a lot of conversations happening right now, especially for rising companies, startups, entrepreneurs, is what are you selling? You know, yeah. I think when you focus just on the product, you lose the opportunity of developing this greater North Star and selling a value, selling a proposition, selling history, educating people beyond just what this thing is. And I find it really incredible that you have all of this in your portfolio and it works really well.
Yeah. Absolutely.
I think one of the questions that I'm sure everyone's thinking about is, especially as a newer brand, in an environment that you're talking about, could you talk through the challenges of kicking off this business, especially as a female Black-owned business? I'm sure you've come across quite a bit of challenges. Can you talk us through some of those issues and how you've overcome them?
Yeah, here's the funny thing is people ask me this question all of the time, and I couldn't even tell you because it's almost like if you're looking at a person who's running a race and their race is hurdles, right? They're just jumping over them as naturally as a person who's just running on a flat track. And so I really don't look at those hurdles as being anything real. They are just things that have to be. So I spend about as much time on them as the runners do. Like I jump over it and keep it moving. And I couldn't tell you about hurdle number 12 back there. I don't know. What I will say is in the very beginning, the thing that I find, I guess, the funniest of the different things that have happened is in the beginning, I don't know if you know this, but one of the ways that we've made history is that this is the first major spirit brand to be led by all women. All 4 of our leadership team are all women. We just added a director of marketing on Monday, adding to that. So now we've got incredible. 5 that are a part of our ELT that are all women. And it wasn't that I was looking to hire all women. I was looking for the best and the most passionate. And it just so happened that they ended up all being women. And I don't know if that's because of the nature of this story or the nature of this brand that is what happened, but that's just the way that it kind of came together. Well, in the beginning, it's myself, our head of whiskey operations, Sherry Moore, and Kate Jorkins, our SVP of global sales. And so we are looking at the 3 of us, and we're the ones that are really out there trying to get everything that we need. When you are beginning a whiskey company, you have 2 choices. You can start with a distillery and make your own juice from scratch, or you can find a distillery that is making the type of juice you want and you perfect it. Those are the different things. In our case, we decided to do both. And so that means we had a lot of needs. We had sourcing needs. We also had basic things like bottles, corks. We needed a co-packer. We needed someone to bottle for us, someone to distill for us, all these different things. We needed distributors. We needed sales. And Kate, Sherry, and I were having a conversation one day, and we realized we were all having the exact same challenge, which was none of us were getting phone calls returned. Mm-hmm. Now, these are people that are in the business of doing what it is that we needed, and no one was returning our phone calls. And so I told them, I said, I want to test a theory. Send me an email that with the name, number, company, and just a short synopsis of what you were calling them for. And forward that to me. I'm going to add that, make one single list, and I'm going to forward it to my husband. And I'm going to have him make the calls, and let's see what happens. In every single instance, he either got through right away as the head of Uncle Nearest, this new premium whiskey brand, or if he didn't get through right away, he was called back by the end of the day. And at some point in most of those conversations, he'd be asked, hey, do you drink beer? Hey, do you golf? Hey, like it became this whole brotherhood thing. And so what we decided instead of, or I guess I decided, instead of trying to, fight this glass ceiling or whatever you want to call it, I don't have time for that. Our goals were too big. And so I just said, hey, babe, can you just keep doing what you're doing? Anybody who doesn't call us back, we'll forward it to you. And so if you go back and you look at any interview that I did, and I did hundreds of them, I still do, I did hundreds of them in the first couple of years. If you look at the title that is associated with my name, it is Chief Historian. Mm-hmm. I did not go public as CEO until last year.
Wow.
But it worked.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's just really interesting to see that in play in the industry. In terms of that experience, what led you to actually then take on that title versus staying on as Chief Historian? Did the business change in a way that you felt comfortable becoming that person, or was it just a matter of success growing and you felt like it was time to announce yourself as that person?
Well, it's just that the press started calling me CEO because once they figured it out, so it only took one person to figure it out, then everybody else. So then when they would ask, what is your title? they would always make sure founder and CEO was in there from that point moving forward. Even if they also put chief historian with it, they would always make sure founder or CEO was one of them. And so it's really the press that did it, but I kept it under wraps for a really good amount of time.
Yeah,
As long as I could.
I would have gone in immediately, because I think, again, the opportunity, and especially for women in the wine and spirits industry, is there's so much potential and growth. I think there are a lot of biases still in place. There are a lot of assumptions that women aren't interested in whiskey. Therefore, how could you be an expert in whiskey? I mean, I could tell you so many stories in which I will sit down with a group of people, order, rye on the rocks, and when they come by with all of the beverages, a beer is placed in front of me, a wine is placed in front of me. It's never the whiskey. And I'm just curious to see, especially with the leadership that you have, are you making headway in breaking that assumption that women are not interested in whiskey and can't be experts in whiskey?
Oh, we're demolishing it. Our company is 50% women, so we are out there absolutely killing it. So I don't think it's going to be an issue for very much longer, especially because women, us and millennials, are the two fastest growing consumers in the premium whiskey space. The reason why premium American whiskey continues to do so well is because of women and millennials coming into the space and really, pushing it forward. So I don't think that this is going to be an issue much longer. We now have a lot of, since I came into this, we have a lot of the major brands who have now appointed women as their presidents. And I don't know if any have been appointed as CEOs, but definitely presidents of North America and all the rest of that stuff. So I've seen that change a lot since I came into the business. And the thing is that I think that people are afraid of what they do not know. They stick with what they know. And so it takes for someone to come in and to prove it wrong, and in addition to show success. Because people, it's not about, bias against women. It is how you view how companies get to success. And so if in a particular industry, the way that you view how people have gotten to success up until that point is being this, and this, and women aren't a part of that, then you may think that we can't do it. But then you have an all-female led spirit brand come in and just rip this industry apart, where the brand name recognition that we have now is that of a 20-year-old company, not a 3-year-old company. So because of that, I think that people are in this industry are looking at it and saying, hey, maybe we need to turn some of this over to women. We might be able to get stuff done faster.
Yeah, absolutely. We've been talking a bit about diversity in general between gender and race. I think one of the key things is starting to break down the wall and encouraging people who feel underrepresented that they do have a place in this industry, whether it's working in the industry or just as a consumer. I just wanted to hear your thoughts about what diversity looks like in the wine and spirits industry. What can we do as consumers, or where do you think the industry needs to go to make sure that it's more inclusive?
Yeah, well, I think the industry overall, one of the things that's within every industry, you have unique challenges, right? So American whiskey, we have a unique challenge as it relates to African Americans. And that has everything to do with how the industry began, where enslaved people did not have a choice as to whether or not they worked in this industry. And so you're generally not going to see us in industries in which we didn't have a choice. You're generally not going to see us as housekeepers. I know in some places where the population is overwhelmingly African American, you will, but most places you will not see us as housekeepers in people's houses, right? Maybe at hotels and things, but not in people's houses. You're generally not going to see us in cotton. You're not going to see us in tobacco. You're not going to see us in American whiskey. So American whiskey has a very unique hurdle that it has to overcome that I actually think is different than the other spirits. Because if you take rum, for instance, well, we know Black people have been making rum forever. There's no secret to that. I think if you see a white person making rum, then you're confused, right? So rum doesn't have the same issue. Vodka comes out of Russia. And so the way that vodka came in and the way that it was imported and the way that we treat it is differently because of where it came from. So I think the first thing we have to do is sort of break down and not try to put everything into buckets. I will deal specifically with American whiskey. because that's the piece that I understand, and that's the piece that I study. The diversity, a part of it is that we simply don't get the applications. If I, as an African-American woman, the first African-American to own a major spirit brand, I know people think it's different celebrities. No. No. And so as that person, and as the person who made history by being the first African-American to ever be featured on a major whiskey magazine anywhere in the world, I would think that if anybody would get resumes from African-Americans or people of color, it would be me. None. There were almost no qualified people in the first 2 years of my company, and I was doing a lot of hiring, and I was not getting the resumes of people of color. And so the first thing we have to do is make the industry cool to people of color. We have to make it not only accessible, but we have to make sure that they are seeing people like us at the top. And in order to get them to come in lower levels, in your entry levels, if you will, they have to know that we can be at the top, not just me in an entrepreneurial role, but actually in the business. We have to be able to see one another at the top. So the very first thing that we can do is make sure that all of the leadership positions in our field, so in our industry, so that your master distiller, your master blender, your head of maturation, your distillery plant managers, head of marketing, we have to make sure that there is a person of color in all those roles across, and that they are out front, that people are able to see them. I can tell you that the number of resumes I get from people of color in 2020 versus 2019 and earlier, night and day. And so I do believe that even me being out there and doing so much press has allowed people of color to see themselves in this industry as well.
Absolutely. I think that seeing yourself in the industry makes such a big difference. And, I think it inspires someone from the ground up. And I know that you're putting a lot of initiatives and efforts around that. Do you want to talk more about the Nearest and Jack Advancement Initiative?
Yeah. All right. So where we were just talking about with having people in those positions, right? And them being people that are comfortable being out front. Well, they don't exist. They weren't in the pipeline. And so we had to very quickly figure out, how do we create a pipeline to get people there? And so the Nearest and Jack Advancement Initiative, both of our companies have pledged $2.5 million each. So it's a $5 million initiative to begin.
Incredible.
And we have 3 pillars to it. The first is the Nearest Green School of Distilling. It is at Motlow State College, which is the fastest growing college in Tennessee. They've got, I think, 8 campuses. But more importantly, they are very close to Jack Daniel's Distillery and Nearest Green Distillery, which is important for the hands-on piece of it. And we began looking at, how do we create a pipeline in distilling, because there has never been, believe it or not, there has never been an African-American master distiller of a major brand since Nearest Green.
Wow.
So he's the first and only.
Time has passed, y'all.
Which is insane. So the question became, how do we create that? It's not in the pipeline. How do we create it intentionally? And so I began working with the president over at Motlow State College. And when it came time to, okay, we need to create the curriculum, well, it made no sense for us to do it without Jack Daniel, because they're literally right there. And so I went to them and said, hey, this is what we're doing, Nearest Green School of Distilling. Do you guys want to be a part of that? Didn't ask them for any money or anything of that nature. We were already underwriting it, but it was more of a, do you want to be a part of the curriculum, helping us write the curriculum, helping us build the program out type of thing. And so we began working together on that back in 2000 and maybe 2018, into 2018, maybe early 2019. But the bottom line is, at the end of last year, the curriculum had already been approved by Motlow State College, and it's now sitting with the regional board, who I'm like, tick, 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 let's go, guys. But it's sitting with the regional board so that it can then move on to the accrediting body, because we want to make sure this isn't a certificate program, this is an accredited degree. And so that piece of it is one arm of the Nearest and Jack Advancement Initiative. The second one is the Business Incubation Program. We call it BIP. We are coming alongside African-American owned or Black owned brands that already exist, and helping to take them from just surviving in this industry to thriving. There literally before us was none, I don't think, other than us, that is really truly thriving in this industry. And so we've learned so much. And also Jack Daniel's has such a huge organization that with our know-how and our just kind of feisty way, we say we're real scrappy, meaning the Uncle Nearest side. We know how to get stuff done, but it's scrappy. And they're, you know, more organized, been doing it longer. They take forever to do anything, but that's what the big companies do, right? Mm-hmm. And so it gives a bit of a yin and a yang that works. And so the business incubation program, we're coming alongside these guys and expanding their distribution networks across America, getting them into places like Total Wine and Reserve Bar, finding them distributors in different states where they have opportunity, but distributors wouldn't take them on. We have are redoing, many of them needed repackaging, that they had great product, but the packaging was a problem. So then we bring in branding teams to do that, PR teams, marketing teams. So we're literally loaning our resources to these other companies and essentially building competitors because we don't have ownership stakes in any of them, nor will we. This is solely to get them to a place of being able to succeed, because 5 years from now, I want to see a whole lot more Uncle Nearests, right? Absolutely. And so that's not going to happen if we don't come alongside and help them. So going back to your question of how do you guys help, begin supporting those types of brands that are Black owned, women owned, really get behind them and understand if product is garbage, don't buy it. Mm-hmm. I'm not saying support just because they're people of color and just because they're women. I most certainly will not do it. If it's garbage, go back to the drawing board and come back to me with a quality product, then I will support that. So I'm not saying just be blind in your purchases, because then that's just not good stewardship over your finances. That's a whole other story. So then the third element is the Leadership Acceleration Program, LAP, as we call it. And that is where we have set aside apprenticeships for head distiller and head of maturation, and so all of those top jobs. And what we're doing is finding people that are already have a skill set within our industry, have already proven themselves to be hard workers and could do the jobs if given the opportunity. And then they are paid, we match whatever their pay is. No matter what their pay level is, we match it so they don't have to lose anything on this journey. And then we pay for all of the education that is involved in this apprenticeship, and then all of their travel as they go and shadow the top people in this country. So for instance, our head distiller apprentice, Tracy Franklin, she was the face nationally for Glenfiddich Scotch. And everyone knows her in the industry, everyone loves her. What they didn't know is that she came into the industry for distilling, but no opportunities presented themselves. And she trained under the brilliant late Dave Pickerel, but was never given an opportunity because none came available when she was doing that, and she needed a job. So then she decided to go on the sales and marketing side of the industry. And now we get to bring her back to why she was here to begin with and to give her that opportunity. So right now she's shadowing the master distiller at Catoctin Creek, who's also the president of the American Craft Spirits Association, one of the few women master distillers in our industry. So she's shadowing her at her distillery. She leaves from there, and she has about 6 different master distillers around the country that she's shadowing at their distilleries. So by the time her program ends, she will be one of the most skilled distillers this industry has ever seen.
Yeah, I think these pillars are incredible because there's not one pipeline or one way to get into the system, right? Like you need representation on different levels. You need to understand it's just not about making the product. Sometimes it's about selling the story and vice versa. And so I think it's really important to recognize in order to fulfill a more inclusive and diverse group, like you have to think of all of the various levels. And I love that this program is thinking through that. It's just not, we tell the story of Tracy, like it's not just about distilling, it's about learning all of the other experiences to create a better product.
Absolutely.
Speaking of product, we would be remiss not to talk about the product, but just a reminder for everyone to jump in the Q&A if you have any questions, because we certainly want to address them while we have Fawn with us. So so tell us about the product. I know that we have a few whiskeys, you have a ton of accolades. Would love to hear more about it.
Yeah, can you see them, any of them behind me?
Yeah, we see.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, so at the top here, well, ignore the left because you can't get it here. This one's only in the UK. That one was a limited release from a couple years ago. But the 1856, 1884, and the 1820, those are the ones, well, 1856 and the 1884, those are the ones you will find out in the marketplace. We have nothing but premium whiskey in our bottles. The majority of them are about between 7 and 8 years old, but we blend as much as 15-year-old in our product. It really is a matter of getting the best taste profile. And you can have, 10 different people grab barrels from the exact same distillery, made the same way, aged the same length of time, and how you blend it will completely determine what they taste like. They will not necessarily taste the same. So for us, because we have Victoria as our master blender who has a fantastic palate, and then Sherry Moore is the biggest nerd ever of Tennessee whiskey. There is literally not one person in the Tennessee whiskey business that has more knowledge or experience than Sherry Moore, which is unbelievable. So 31 years, even when you look at the master distiller for Jack Daniels, who just resigned, I believe about a week ago, she hired him. And before him, Jimmy Bedford, she trained him. And, and so their current VP, she hired him. And so we are really fortunate. And one of the things that she was a long time ago was treasurer of the Filtration Society of all things. Like, I mean, that takes nerd to another level where they literally studied the filtrations of what kind of filtration. It makes massive difference. And so for us, one of the things that people will say about our whiskey above all else is it's unbelievably smooth. And it's because of a 2-step filtration process that she does utilizing diatomaceous earth, the stuff we use to clean out our body. As it turns out, it also does a good job cleaning garbage out of whiskey. And the other is natural carbon from coconut shells. And it is, the end result is phenomenal. And it's because of Sherry. So yes, it has won more awards than, and all the top awards, double gold in San Francisco, world's best by Whiskey Magazine, top 5 whiskeys in the world, Cigar and Spirits Magazine, like across the board, we're pretty much sweeping everything.
Yeah, it's incredible. I do have a bottle of the 1856.
1856, yes.
I think it's really cool that these are all numbered, and I think that they are associated with a story, but I'm sure also it affects the profile. So could you tell us a little bit more about what the years represent and what that profile is associated with it?
Yeah, so 1856 represents the year that we believe Nearest Green had already perfected whiskey, Tennessee whiskey. And the reason why we believe that is a young Jack Daniel was introduced to him in 48. He was born in 1848. He was introduced to Nearest at around 8 years old, according to his own biography. And when he was introduced to him, the person who introduced him did so by saying, "This is Uncle Nearest. He's the best whiskey maker I know of." Well, there were 16 other distilleries in a 4-mile radius. So that said a lot about Nearest's way of making whiskey. So that introduction happened in 1856. So that is the year for that. The profile of it is it's 100 proof. So it packs a punch, but it's really smooth on the back end coming down. It hugs your chest versus punches it. So that, and it is a blend of between 8 and 15-year-old. We don't have a percentage in terms of this percentage of 8-year-old, 9-year-old, 10-year-old, 11-year-old. It really just is determined by the taste profile overall. So that's 1856. The cream bottle, 1884, on the back of that is actually the signature of 5th generation Nearest Green descendant Victoria Edie Butler. That is her blend. She chooses what barrels go into 1884. So every single barrel that's in 1884, she tasted it, she chose it. If she tasted a barrel and she didn't like it for her blend, doesn't mean it's not a great barrel. She just didn't want it for her blend. It doesn't go in it. So that one is specific to her palate, and she has a sweeter palate, and she likes lighter whiskey. So hers clocks in at 93 proof. That's the lowest proof we have. And then the 1820, which is our unicorn, it breaks the internet every time we roll it out.
It does. I am trying to find it.
Listen, it's insanity. But we sell it only at the distillery, only at Nearest Green Distillery. And then we release it every now and again online to be shipped out across America. And whatever lucky people are able to get through in that, 60 seconds it
Not
takes to sell the
lucky.
whole barrel. Yeah. And that one is always a minimum of 11-year-old. It goes up to 15-year-old, but it's always a minimum of 11-year-old, and it is always cask strength.
Absolutely. Yeah, I've been trying to get a hold of that. It seems really interesting. It seems fun. I've had the chance to taste this whiskey throughout the summer, and it's really enjoyable, whether it's on the rocks, which is my preference,
Yeah.
neat in cocktails. Would love to hear how you might want to drink it this fall.
Yeah, so I used to only drink it neat. That was my thing. I only wanted it neat. Don't put it on the rocks for me, because my running joke was, I don't trust your water. When we'd go into restaurants and things like that, I'm like, I don't know if your water works with my whiskey. And so, but see, you've got a single cube, so you're good. You're good. And if you're making your own ice, so you know that you can trust your water, you've purified it.
New York City water, it's the best.
Yeah, there you go. There you go. And so that piece of it is, so I was a completely neat girl. And then I would show up at the different bars and order it neat. And, the bartenders are like, 100 proof neat, huh? And so I think for a while, because that was so the rebel in me, I refused to drink it as a cocktail, because I saw their faces when I would order 100 proof whiskey or
I
or
know that
cask
face.
strength whiskey.
Yep.
Yeah. So, but as I've gotten to know the bartending community so incredibly well, and what they do is art. Those mixologists are unbelievable. So because of that, now I drink cocktails more than I drink it neat or on the rocks. But I think in part, it's sort of an homage to those guys and what they do. So my favorite at the moment, I have three. And it is a classic daiquiri made with Uncle Nearest 1884. So a classic daiquiri is usually made with rum. I swap it out for the Uncle Nearest 1884. I think it tastes better. I love it. So that is my favorite. Then a New York sour topped with a full body Cabernet. Incredible. And then the other is a penicillin. That is usually a Scotch drink. It usually has a Scotch floater. And I swap it out with Uncle Nearest 1884 as the base, and then the floater ends up being the Uncle Nearest 1856, because that's got a little bit more spice to it. And I love the ginger. So those are my three cocktails of the moment, of this year, I should say.
And I'm sure there are other cocktails folks out there can enjoy. There's obviously a wide range of
old fashioned. It makes
the
1856 makes hands down one of the best old fashions, period. So yeah.
Maybe that'll be my evening drink today. One question that we have, which I think is actually a really interesting one, and would love to hear your responses. Is this considered a bourbon, or do you think of yourself just as a Tennessee whiskey?
Actually, the reason why the bottle says premium American whiskey is because whatever you think is premium from American whiskey, we fit the categories. So we follow the same exact rules as straight bourbon whiskey out of Kentucky. So Kentucky bourbon. Bourbon can be made anywhere in America. A lot of people think it can only come out of Kentucky, because more than, I think, 95% does come out of Kentucky. But in order to be, you've got bourbon coming out of New York. And so bourbon can be made anywhere in America. A straight bourbon whiskey is a Kentucky bourbon, New York bourbon, whatever. It's the exact same thing. The only difference is that we add an additional filtration step to it, which is what Nearest Green taught. And that's taking your traditional bourbon distillate and running it slowly for about 12 to 14 days through sugar maple charcoal. And it removes some of the impurities. It smooths it out before it goes into the barrel. Because it's removing congeners and fusel oils and things of that nature, but it is not adding anything, it is still, the legal definition is still a straight bourbon whiskey.
Yep, absolutely. And I think that's one thing a lot of folks don't realize is so much of whiskey, bourbon, scotch, gin, a lot of it starts with the same mash. There are a lot of details that are the same. And to your point, once you get to the mixing, the blending process, that's when the magic happens and differentiates you from everyone else. So a really great question from you all. Please keep them coming. One person had a really important question, because I was thinking about this the other day. are you planning to offer other sizes? Because I would love to obviously try the other whiskeys, but is there a smaller size that I can take?
So yeah, so we are currently in the middle of molding bottles at 50 milliliter, 200 milliliter, 375 milliliter, and 1 liter. And so yes, we will have a wide range, and it takes about 8 months from the time we began the process to the time. So somewhere around the summer of next year, you should begin seeing our bottles in different sizes.
That's amazing. One thing I would love to hear from you, I mean, it's a topic that everyone is thinking about and every business has to think about, is what are the effects of the pandemic on your business? I assume supply chain might be an issue, what you're doing for marketing, how you approach on, off premise. What are the challenges that you're seeing as a result of the pandemic?
Yeah, so we're going to go back to those hurdles, right? They're running in that we just don't pay very much attention to it. So even with the pandemic, I had 13 positions open when the pandemic began. And I know for a lot of folks, they began laying off. A lot of them in our industry, craft distilleries, they had to. They began laying off, they began furloughing. And I made a determination at the very beginning, we are going to figure this out. And I am not going to make permanent decisions based on what I believe is a temporary problem. And so we decided to continue hiring. It was the best decision ever, because as it turns out, if you're the only salespeople in the field, then it works in your favor. And so the way that I've explained it to people is it's like we were on the line of scrimmage and we hiked the ball and the entire defensive line just parted and allowed us to run down the field unopposed. And so we have actually had far more growth during this period of time than we could have ever had if we, because before there were defenders all over the field. Now we're just like, you know, da, 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 da. So for us, it's actually been quite different. It has been, you know, you have challenges because when you're talking about on the operation side, because you're implementing different things for COVID. And so if someone has a temperature, even if they don't have it, they got to go home. And so you never know from day to day how many people you're going to have on the bottling line, how many people you're going to have distilling, how many people you're going to have in packaging. And so that has presented some challenges. But then on the flip side, the opportunity there becomes scarcity marketing. If our bottles are sold out all over this country. And so everywhere, all the liquor stores or retailers you go into and you see all of these beautiful products and then you see 2 empty spaces in the shop, then that's Uncle Nearest. and so there's something about scarcity marketing that then people want it even more. So then when it does hit the shelves again, it flies right off. And so what is a challenge is also turning out to be an opportunity for us. So that's the way that our company has looked at everything, is every single challenge is literally an opportunity. Hurdle it, keep going. Hurdle it, keep going.
Yep, absolutely. I imagine one hurdle is you opened up a distillery center for visitors, and I imagine that you're not having visitors at the moment.
Yeah.
What does that look like for you? And you know, we certainly want to invite our guests on this call to join us as well. So let us know, where is it? You know, what can you experience at the center?
Well, you can't experience anything at the moment. So it's a 270-acre property that we began building out. We opened up phase 1 in September of 2019. So we were already only open on Saturdays and Sundays for tours. Anyhow, we were sold out pretty much every weekend. And Monday through Friday, it continued to be a construction site. Well, again, going back to every challenge has its opportunity. By us being closed, the construction crew is able to just sort of push through. They don't have to clean up after themselves during the week because we're going to have it open on the weekends. And so we're just moving forward. All of our team members that were at the distillery, we have found them other jobs within our company. And so nobody's losing out in that regard. And that was my biggest piece. And so I'm in no rush to reopen. There is an interesting portion of the population who believes wearing a mask impacts their civil liberties. I'm not interested in having that debate. And I'm most certainly not interested in my team members having that debate. Mm-hmm. And so until such time as the CDC says it's safe not to have to wear a mask, I'm not reopening it because I'm not going to put my team members through that.
Yep, absolutely. And that's totally understandable, especially when we can bring it home and try it ourselves. And hopefully people will get their hands on it wherever they might be buying their spirits. We have a great question. I sometimes forget that we are such a global audience. You had mentioned the special blend that's available in the UK. What does it look like for other international markets,
Oh,
or even more in the UK?
yeah. So the Nathan Green 1870, that is the only place that it's Nathan Green, and a part of that is to protect our trademarks. So Nearest Green, Nathan Green, Uncle Nearest, we have to have bottles out under all of them in order to protect the trademark, but we don't want to have market confusion here in the United States. We don't want to have brand confusion, and so the Nathan Green bottle lives only in one place, which is the UK, and it is made specifically, the barrel is picked specifically for the British Bourbon Society. They get 1 barrel per year maximum, and that is it. And so if you're not a part of the British Bourbon Society, it's not available at all. But Uncle Nearest 1856 is available in the UK. But even before the problems of the pandemic, even before the problems that we are all experiencing in this country in terms of race, even before the tornado that wiped out so much of Nashville, which everybody forgets about because 2 days later, the COVID broke out. And so even in spite of all of this, we are also still dealing with tariffs and, you know, trade laws that like are giving us whiplash because they keep changing who we're fighting with and all the rest of that stuff. And so I made a decision that there is so much opportunity here for the brand in the US that I would pull back from international expansion until such time is we have trade agreements that are in place and are not changing on a monthly basis.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's definitely a big challenge, knowing or not knowing, actually. I think it's probably the best way to phrase it, what that looks like. Are there any specific markets that you're excited to tap into?
Oh, absolutely. South Africa and Australia, Germany. We're already throughout the UK. We're already in Japan. Japan's a great market for us. And so, but yeah, I would probably say Germany, South Africa, Australia, New Zealand, that region, those are the ones I'm most excited to head into once all of the craziness ends. We're heading into Canada right now, just kind of testing some things out. But again, I'm not putting much resource behind that. And we'll just kind of test the waters in a few places and see where it naturally takes off, and wherever it naturally takes off, that's where we'll double down.
Awesome. And hopefully it is going everywhere because it is a fantastic thing that we can hopefully share with the world.
Thank you.
A couple questions as well. We've got one question in which someone is interested in understanding how you feel about the smaller brands being bought up by larger conglomerates. I know that you have a relationship with Jack Daniels, which is Brown-Forman, I believe. What are your thoughts in terms of the craft and then the sort of the small batch world and their relationship with the bigger ones?
I think the craft brands keep selling before they can get to be big brands. So every single one has the opportunity to be one of the big guys. But for whatever reason, and it's for reasons I don't fully understand, there is this thought process. And in coming into this business, I was told this a million times. So I thought at some point I was going to have to partner with a bigger guy in order to be able to get the distribution, in order to be able to, and it's just not true. And the beauty of us moving and being so scrappy and getting so much done as a company is all of us are very, very clear that we can be one of the big guys. We don't have to be bought by one of the big guys. And I think that that's the piece that a lot of people miss because we're growing so fast. Everyone thinks that, everyone thinks that we are going to sell. And I had my new director of marketing that came over, started on Monday. She was coming from a company that's owned by Pernod Ricard. And as she was leaving, her colleagues kept saying, you know, they tried to sell to us. You know, they tried to sell to us. And I was like, have you lost your mind? Not only have I not tried to sell to you, not only have I not tried to sell to anyone, but every single incoming request to buy our company has been rejected, like unequivocally. There is like no, the one thing people know when they reach into me and inquire, there is not this cute little dance of maybe I'm not even going to take your call because the answer is no. Like, that's literally my response. There's no need for me to take your call. The answer is no. It's not, I call it HBU, highest and best use of my time. So if you talk to different investment bankers and those guys out there, they'll tell you they got a response from me going, it's nothing personal. This isn't HBU for me.
Absolutely. Yeah. Speaking of opportunities, I mean, clearly you're growing as a business. Are you also growing your product line? You don't have to tell us all the secrets, so we'd like to know if you're experiencing with or experimenting with barrel finishes, aging process. Tell us a little bit more.
Yeah, so I have had something in R&D for almost 3 years.
Oh, wow.
And I've had to bring in a lot of different distillers to try to help me to get it right. And I think we're pretty close. And so once we get it right, there's not been anything like it in the market. And so that will roll out. But for me, if it's not perfect, it's not coming out. So we're just going to keep playing with it. We're going to keep seeing what we can do with it. But yeah.
Awesome. Well, we're excited to see whatever that might be. Before we wrap up with you, would love to hear more. You had mentioned telling the story of Uncle Nearest on social media. Are there tips from a marketing perspective, from a social media perspective, for our aspiring entrepreneurs on how to build a better brand online?
Just be authentic. Don't think so much. I think, when I look at a lot of the bigger companies and they do these massive social media plans, and the challenge is that if you begin to disconnect yourself from social media, that's your voice in the world. So if you see a social media post, our social media manager is amazing. It all gets run through me first, because there has to continue to be that connection to the foundation of the brand and the founding of the brand. That voice has to come out. And so in every single post, you're going, even if she wrote it, even if she did everything, you're still going to feel my voice in it, because it's important. So I think being authentic, but also just staying connected to it. No matter how big you grow, stay connected to it, because that is how the world sees you, and it will be forevermore.
Yeah. You had mentioned earlier, as consumers, one of the big things that we can do is really following folks and companies that are doing the work in terms of diversity or bringing more interest to the industry. Do you have some names, some companies that our folks should check out?
Oh yeah. So there is if you like Bailey's, there is this couple that has LS Cream Liqueur. And they are a Haitian couple, and in Haiti, there is something called crema. Apparently, like, it's something that the grandmothers all make. They all have their crema recipes, and everybody comes over and they drink crema. They figured out how to create a shelf-stable version of it.
That's
and
cool.
It is phenomenal. I keep it in my refrigerator. When people come over, I make Uncle Nearest cocktails for everybody. But before they get an Uncle Nearest cocktail, I have them taste
crema.
LS, because it's incredible. So that's LS Cream Liqueur. Another one, the McBride sisters, their wines, if you are into wines,
yes,
out of New York, 10-to-1 rum is fantastic. And so I would just, right now, it's the easiest time to be able to Google Black-owned spirit brands, because everybody's doing a list, right? And so you can go on there but what, again, kind of going back to quality, right? So make sure you then go and look at the reviews for the brand. And don't buy 3-star reviewed products. And that would be my advice, because then what you don't want to do is be turned off from buying products from people of color and women, because you've now associated it with products that are not of the same caliber and standard of the other products, right? So yeah, make sure to check out the reviews first.
Awesome. Well, thank you for sharing that. Hopefully folks wrote it down, but don't worry, we'll circulate an email after this. We'll point you to all of these references. I think they're really helpful and really exciting for people to explore. I think there's so many names and companies that people are not aware of, and they're coming to surface right now for a lot of folks, and that's a really great opportunity.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for joining us today, sharing your time, your energy. I think your story in terms of uncovering Uncle Nearest as well as the story of Uncle Nearest is incredible. If folks want to find you on Instagram, where might they find you?
Yeah, Fawn.Weaver on Instagram, and we're Uncle Nearest on Instagram. And if you tag me from the Uncle Nearest account, I always get those. I always respond to those. And I am not as big on Facebook as I am on Instagram. Instagram is it's super simple.
It's easy. Yeah, absolutely. Well, folks, you heard it from Fawn. You can reach out to her on Instagram, check her out, check out Uncle Nearest, obviously, whether it's online or in person at a wine and spirits shop near you, and maybe at a restaurant near you, hopefully in the places that are a little bit more open than New York City, for instance. We'd like to thank our audience for joining us today. Thank you for your questions and your energy. As I mentioned, we'll send up a follow-up email that will share some links of resources as well as a recording of this program. So hopefully we can share this out for other folks to check out. If you enjoyed this conversation, you can go to events.jhu.edu for more programming. And of course, we look forward to seeing you at another event sometime soon. So everyone, cheers. Enjoy an 1856 or something else that's out in the market for you. And we hope to see you soon. Take care.
Cheers. Thank you, Julie.
Thank you.